Okay, good morning everybody and welcome on this nice, well it's sunny here, autumn morning, and we are here to talk about a really interesting topic, I hope, which is the future of agile working. I'd like to introduce myself and the panellists. I'm Emma Burrows, I'm head of the Employment and Pensions team at Trowers and Hamlins, and I'm joined today by John Turnbull, who is a partner in Trowers and Hamlins Employment and Pensions team, who's going to be talking about some of the legal issues. Janine Chamberlain, who is a director of LinkedIn's UK Talent Solutions business and a member of the UK leadership team. She leads a team of 30 people to help companies attract, hire, develop, engage and retain the best talent, and has a wonderful insight in what some of the many members of LinkedIn are doing in this space. And then I'd also like to introduce Emma Holden. And Emma is Global Head of HR for Schroders. And for Schroders is the London-based financial services firm, fund manager. And on the 17th of August, it announced a permanent embrace of flexible working across its business, which has caused quite a stir in the papers. So we're very lucky to have Emma with us as well. Thank you very much for those of you who've submitted questions before this session. We've had some fantastic questions and we've shaped the discussion around them. I'd like to invite you to ask some more questions during the course of this session. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Zoom webinar format, you have at the bottom of your screen a Q&A button and a chat button. I'd be grateful if you could keep the chat for tech questions or things like that, and if you have any questions that you want to put to the panel, please use the Q&A function. This session will be recorded and we'll all post it on our LinkedIn pages after this, and also on it'll also be on the Trowers website. So if you do submit a question, bear in mind that your name will be there. I will use your first name when I ask a question, when I repeat the question, but if you want to submit an anonymous question, that's fine. So we're going to kick off, first of all, with a poll. And this is actually one of the questions we've had in advance. So I'm going to launch that poll now, and I'd ask you please to start it. And it's, do you have any plans to roll out a home working package to your workforce to introduce more agility in the medium to long term? And we'd be really grateful if as many delegates as possible can contribute to that poll. That's great. And I'm going to kick off with a question, please, for Janine. So, Janine, what are you seeing in terms of trends of what employers and employees want once we're over the pandemic?
Thank you, Emma. It's a real pleasure to be here, by the way. Hi, everyone. So what we are seeing, and I think this probably isn't a surprise to anyone who has a sort of scalable way to kind of listen to your employees, more than half of people would like to continue to have a flexible working arrangement where they can continue to work regularly from home. And actually, it's almost 80% of people want to have some form of change after the pandemic and not go back to the way that things used to be. And the great thing is, we've also done some research amongst C-level executives in the UK. We've interviewed about 250 of them, and almost half of them are also willing and looking into how they can offer more flexibility to their employees after the pandemic, which I think is a really good sign. And I think even, to take that step further, I think it's one thing for people to work remotely. The next step really is that flexible working. How do we think about the hours that we work, for example? And about 40% of C-level execs are already thinking about introducing more flexibility.
Very interesting. So I'm now going to end the poll and share the results with everybody. And I think you'll find that it reflects very much what you've been saying, Janine. I don't know if you'd like to comment on that. But only 5% have no plans to roll out a home working package at all. 78% anticipate staff working from home more, and 16% anticipate at least 50% of staff working from home full time. So
No surprises there. And I think there's the post-pandemic view, and then we also have to consider the fact that we still are in the middle of a pandemic. And if you look at what people are saying about that, there's less than 20% feel ready to go back to an office environment right now out of concerns for their health and safety, care responsibilities, and all of the other things as well. So I think we all have no choice but to consider what we offer our employees right now in this moment.
Yes, it seems a one-way travel, doesn't it, really? And even if we all get very fed up with home working in the next 6 months, it might be difficult to stop that travel. Yes. So Janine, what concerns are the minority who want to work in the office full-time raising?
Yeah, I think there's a few different things. It obviously is very dependent on someone's home situation. So there are absolutely people who find it very difficult to stay focused and engaged with work because either they have young children at home that are distracting them, maybe young people who live with flatmates, they may not have the best internet connections, which might make it really hard to work. So I think those are some of those concerns. I think the other part is that people do feel like they miss some boundaries between their home and their work lives. Typically, a commute is a beautiful break in your day where you can kind of reset. Either you get ready for work, or it's that end of day moment where you get ready to kind of leave work behind, and people don't have that break right now. As a result of that, there's a lot more hours in the day that people tend to be working. So on average, people are clocking up about 28 hours more every week than they would have done previously. And that's obviously a concern because that might lead to burnout, that might lead to mental health problems. So those are the concerns.
Great. A question here then from someone we've received before the session. Is an innovative and agile organizational culture inimical with working from home? So does working from home hinder such a culture?
It's a great question. And I think to some extent, yes, because we all haven't quite figured out how we do this really well in a remote or in a virtual environment. I think there's also lots of upside. Even if you look at, a webinar like we are hosting right now, I really do think if we were all in offices, we would have found it really hard to get 200 people together for an hour to discuss a topic like this. But now, because we can all do it from the comfort of our own homes, we don't have to travel somewhere, it's actually quite easy to host something like this and to bring people together. So there's a lot of upside. I think we still need to figure out how we do things like brainstorming well. How do we work together collaboratively to come up with those creative ideas? So I think naturally we feel like we can't work from home and still be innovative, agile, and creative. But there's a lot of technology that's being developed at the moment where we can, really, I guess, replicate the type of work that you would do in an office setting. So I don't think that this will hinder us. I think we need to reinvent the way that we work and the way that we work together.
Okay, and clearly we're moving to a model where people will be working at home and also in the office. If we go back to our poll, it's only 16% that are having people working from home more than 50% of the time. So how do you think office space will change? What will the new world office look like?
Yeah, so I think office space will be used in a different way. I would find it really hard to believe that, next year when we can go back to our offices, we basically take our laptop, travel into the office, sit down in front of our computers, and we just do our work all day. We will go into the office where we want to work together with people. Either it's classroom training, for example, or it's a meeting where you have a debate and a discussion and you try to I guess collectively maybe move into a new direction or set out some of your goals. And again, coming back to that kind of creative work, I think that's what we will be doing. It's also the connection that you have with your colleagues when you get into the office, and maybe the unplanned learning moments because you just hear your colleague talk about something that you simply didn't know they were working on. So I think the office will absolutely be used for the connection with your colleagues, but we will continue to work from home is my expectation for any focus work that we need to do. And so we'll probably start to plan our days slightly differently. Mondays, I keep my head down, I get a lot of work done. Tuesdays, I go to the office and I'm with my colleagues and I'm going to discuss an exciting new project that we're working on, for example.
That's great. And we've had an interesting question in from Rob. Rob says, how do you see flexible home office working being democratically implemented between senior and junior staff? For instance, line managers may be minded to leave the juniors in the office to answer the phone.
Yeah, great question. So first of all, I do think we are in an era where it's really important to be listening to our employees. So as I said earlier, for those of you who have the tools to regularly ask all of your staff what they want, it won't be a surprise to know that the majority of people will want to have some flexibility. And I think, you know, to ensure that we manage that well as organizations, there's a leadership development, a management training and development that is required to help managers and more senior leaders understand how they operate in a different environment. How do you inspire people? How do you help them still deliver and be engaged, even if they're not right in front of you?
Great. And actually Caroline's asked a question which is quite similar, which is I think a very good question on that point. But how will we manage to successfully train and engage our new members of staff who are on graduate training schemes, etc.? Many of my network contacts are concerned about the impact it will have on our Gen Z population.
Absolutely. And so there's two sides to this. One of which I think, you know, we can see already that a lot of companies are investing in their virtual, not just like interviewing and bringing people through, but actually their virtual onboarding and virtual learning environment. So I think there is technology that can support it. But the big concern here is the experience of people, and it's actually not that dissimilar to what you're hearing a lot about with students who are just starting their university journey, and they just don't have the same experience as what we remember to be, you know, like a really great experience you get away from home. Your first job should be a great experience where you learn from people on the job, where you meet with a lot of colleagues. And so whilst the technology is there, I do think that, you know, in hopefully the not too distant future, that coming together in an office is going to be really important to at least create that experience. I think then the technology can support all the other parts, the execution of work, the learning, the onboarding, but there needs to be a place for people to also connect with people and learn from them.
Well, that's great, Janine, thank you. John, I've got a few legal questions for you now, or sort of semi-legal. The first is how best to balance risks of staff working at home with working in the office, particularly mental health versus physical health?
Okay, thanks, Emma. That's a good question. I'm not sure I'd distinguish really between the two. I think mental health and physical health are equally important. And I think that, you know, legally an employer has a duty to provide a safe place of work. You know, that's the bottom line. And if many businesses who are on the beginning of an agile working journey have historically had not that much agile working or fairly rigid agile working policies, then with everybody in the short term going home en masse, then there are potential issues around ergonomics, you know, desk assessment, health and safety. People are working in very different environments. Some people have got a home office. Some people are in environments where they're sharing a workspace with multiple adults, maybe children as well. Some people are in, you know, shared accommodation, trying to work on the end of a bed. So I think, you know, I think that the physical health and the mental health really intertwine there. In terms of mental health as well, I mean, a lot of people aren't used to working from home for sustained periods of time, and it's important to understand how that affects people, and that will affect everybody differently. I think that, you know, staff surveys and actually listening to people and taking that information and acting on it is very important. I think that information in the workplace that you might talk to your colleagues or walk past a sign that says you can get support and help. It might be on the wall by the coffee machine. That's not there, and so therefore it's important to maybe disseminate that information in a different way, and actually keep people connected. Things like, you know, a book club, recipe swaps, stuff like that. Really good fun, and keeps people I'm engaged and supported. I think those things are important, but I don't think I distinguish between the mental and physical health. And I think, like Janine said, the line between work and home has been blurred. That delineation's not there, and it may not be separated. And I think employers are going to have a responsibility to take a look at that as well.
That's great. I've had an anonymous question in, John, on the same point. How does an employer execute its health and safety responsibilities if workplace now includes the home space? And then the anonymous delegate has said DSE assessment at home, for example.
Yeah, quite. I think it's going to be something that's, like I said, a lot of people are on a different part of their journey, but because of government guidelines for the next 6 months, the vast majority of people are going to be at home, and those assessments are going to need to take place. And I think that anonymous workplace surveys are a good way of starting, so we can understand what working situations people are in, so that those people who feel they need to come to work because of the environment they're in can communicate that. So I think it's an information and fact gathering exercise, and certainly in the long term, if agile working is something that increases exponentially, then those assessments are going to need to take place, and that's going to have to be looked at as a board level issue.
Great, thanks, John. I've had another question in here, which is, if staff attend once a week, so that's work, I presume, can they insist on a designated desk? We want to downsize now. And I've also had a comment in from Andy, which says social distancing will dictate the design of the new workplace. So that's really in response to your comments, Janine, but it's relevant to this question as well, John. Perhaps there's two answers to it now. Well, once we get back into the office, once we're encouraged to go back to work, and then in the long term, looking at agile working on a medium to long term basis.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's got a right to a specific chair. I've never seen a contractual clause that says, you know, you will get the corner dual aspect window overlooking the park. I suspect there's been a few people try it, but I've never seen it agreed. So I don't think anybody's got a right to a particular desk, if that was the question. I'd probably push back a bit on that.
Yeah, I'd agree. Janine, a couple of comments have come in that are relevant to what you were saying. So Alistair says, for us, COVID has just accelerated a process that was underway. Technology makes the daily commute, OTOs. The bigger concern is preserving the learning, the brainstorming, the chats over the water cooler, the corridor chats, which have to be staged rather than ad hoc. Yeah, I think, Alistair, I think we're all agreeing with you there. Yeah, I don't know if you've got any other comments on that, Janine.
Well, so I think there are ways that you can indeed stage that whilst it still feels a little bit more spontaneous. You know, how you bring people together, and then maybe like technology allows us to then break up into groups of 2 or 3 people. So that's something that we do quite regularly across our entire office. Anyone who wants to show up, join the Zoom call, and then you break up into small groups and you kind of have your water cooler chat or a virtual coffee. It's not quite the same, but I think we can keep those things going so that you keep the culture alive of just, you know, exchanging information with people that you don't work with on a day-to-day basis.
Great. And Steve has a question really, which is, Janine referred to, on average, people are clocking up 28% more hours working from home. I think it was 28 hours a week.
Hours, yeah.
Yeah. Does this include distraction time, doing domestic tasks, which we know is why many people like to work from home? While we also know that there is distraction time with chat in the workplace, that at least can be positive for workplace bonding.
Yeah, so apologies, it's 28 hours per month, not per week.
Per month.
But how would we fit in 28 hours a week? So I think we don't know, and I think actually that's one of the, in my personal opinions, it's one of the upsides, and that's why I think it's so important to start rethinking what it means to be working flexibly, and how you even assess and how you measure people based on their outputs rather than based on the hours that they're putting in. One of the things that I think we haven't quite figured out is how this changes the need to be present, because I think we still place almost like an abnormal sort of focus on being present, even if it's now in a digital world? Do you have to be there for all of the different Zoom calls that are put up in a day? Or actually, is someone going to produce their best work when they take an hour out in the middle of the day to go for a walk, or maybe to do their laundry, and then get back to work and can really focus again? So I think we just have to maybe shift some of those traditional ways of thinking about it.
Very interesting. So, Emma, I've got some questions for you as well, please. So it would be really interesting to hear how you balance the needs of what both Schroders and what your employees wanted when you made the decision to embrace flexible working.
Okay, so to resonate what Janine said earlier, when we listened to our employees earlier in the pandemic, over 90% of them told us that they wanted to maintain some sort of flexibility for the long term. And I think we are thinking about this much more than just where people do work, but actually also the when and the how. So this is flexibility in its broader sense. And what we've really started with is rather than coming up with one size fits all, we recognise that within our business we have very different activities and roles within our teams. So we've effectively drawn it for our people as a Venn diagram. So you have what the individual wants and the features of their role. You have what the team needs and the business needs, and then also what our clients need. And where they overlap is where we are able to accommodate flexible working. But, you know, for example, that will vary very differently to our developers within our global technology team, who perhaps can work remotely and come together just around agile planning. Compared to, say, our investment teams, where actually they really want and need to be together to ensure that they're having that regular input into portfolios to deliver for our clients. So, you know, we've really let and empowered our business to actually come up with the solutions that work best for them to ensure we can deliver for our clients at the best at the end of the day.
That's really interesting, and it's very visual. I think it's very easy to understand it when you talk about a Venn diagram. I really like that visualization of the idea. So some questions that we've had in as well. How do you view the ability to detach Agile from the tech sector and apply it to the general business environment? And that fits with one of the questions we've had in today, which is from Lil. Have any of you, I'll ask you first, Emma, come across companies that already have a new target working model in place post-COVID? For example, we've historically looked to the tech sector for workplace innovation, but are there any other industry trailblazers? And I'd answer Lil, Schroders, but you probably have more to say, Emma.
So we actually adopted Agile approach to our technology build about 3 years ago now. So this is a concept that's very familiar to us. So these ideas of MVPs, minimum viable products, but also how priority planning, where teams come together and have these regular check-ins, is absolutely something that lends itself to organizations working more agilely in the future. You know, one of the key things we find with flexibility is the need to have much more regular check-ins, you know, to the point that Janine made earlier about making sure that, you know, to avoid presenteeism, you need really smart objectives, and you need to have those regular check-ins to ensure that managers and employees are really making sure that people are staying on track and that you are delivering your goals for that period of time. That regular check-in methodology is very much what Agile in the tech space is all about. And it's coming together where you need to come together. And interestingly for us, when we do our PI planning historically with our tech teams, we are actually using technology to connect teams in Singapore with London and New York for a whole day PI planning where the whole team comes together. And they are actually really good techniques that we've been able to roll out elsewhere within the group. But, you know, as much as we've obviously seen all the press headlines about what we publish from Schroders, we've always been really clear that actually coming together in the office is really important to us too. We actually now say, actually, whereas we used to leave the office to build teams, we now come into the office to build teams. And it's really about making sure that we're having that culture of innovation and collaboration that's so important about who we are as a business.
And Janine, do you have anything to add to that?
So I think There's probably a logical explanation for the tech sector to be ahead, because a lot of the work happens at a desk. And so that's much easier to shift than, you know, people having to physically be at a location. So there's a handful of companies, Twitter included, who've already said this is the future. Everybody can work from home indefinitely. I had a really great conversation. I don't really want to kind of name this customer because I don't know if they're public about it, but similar to maybe the Venn diagram that Emma was talking about, they created a structure in how they basically look at where you do your best work for what you're focused on. So they have a collaborate, connect, and focus structure. And it's collaborate is obviously about bringing people together, which they will continue to do in their main office hubs. So maybe in central London or in larger cities around the world. Then they have a connect, which is you have to be in the office for something that you physically can't do at home. For some people, that might be going into the office to print off a piece of paper because you don't have a printer at home. They have regional sort of satellite offices set up for people to come in for those type of jobs. And then its focus is just your focused work, which, you know, they encourage everybody to do from home. And again, I think it's that kind of clarity that really helps your employees to understand, okay, this is what I'm doing, therefore I'm going to go and do it from X, Y, or Z location. So I am seeing companies already looking ahead, and these are kind of structures that be implemented for the long term. But there's a lot of companies, I think, who are waiting to see a little bit more data coming out, because we have only had sort of 6 to 7 months of this, and, you know, we don't still really know what the longer term impact is going to be on mental health, on culture, and all these different things. So not all companies are as far ahead as Schroders or Twitter, for example.
Thank you. Emma, another question for you. How do managers ensure the Agile agenda includes learning rather than just the day job?
I think this is a really great question, because you really have to think about how we as humans more broadly are interacting with information today. You know, so it's radically different than the classroom-based environments that we might have had in our training when we started off our careers. You know, people, when they're on their commutes or they're listening to podcasts or they're listening to bite-sized, you know, book summaries, you know, that's how people learn today. They learn very differently than just a classroom-based environment. So you really have to think about the investment that you're making in your technology to be able to deliver that learning in a bite-sized way. So, for example, when we had full lockdown in the UK, we were immediately able to push out really bite-sized 5 minutes, 1 page, couple of bullet points around key activities that we knew managers might need help with. So, for example, managing performance remotely, or you know, how to check in with someone about their mental health, for example. So if you think about the delivery mechanism of it to make it really easy for people, you know, delivering it via iPads, mobile technology, you're much more likely to get the pull factor for learning, and people will utilize it more because it becomes really useful for them on a real-time basis. The other side of that is, I think you also need a little bit more of the stick approach, and you really need to be clear on the stuff that really matters to your culture and organization. You make that training mandatory, and you really keep an eye and you monitor that to make sure that people are really keeping up on the stuff that's really important to you as a business.
And Claire has asked a related question, which is, she says, at her business, we are developing our model and we will have a base set of business core parameters, which include days of work and a set of core hours. But our plan is it'll be decided at a team level, so it works for each team and the role that they do. The challenge I think we will have is getting some people back into the office, even for collaborative team working. Some are comfortable at home in their pajamas. Has the panel come across this? Emma, have you had any issues or?
You know, Janine touched on it earlier. You know, we have, you know, some members of our workforce with extremely high levels of anxiety or health concerns about the virus, and obviously we have to respect that and make sure we look after their well-being first and foremost. You know, I think if you look forward to a day beyond the pandemic, you know, I think firms have to be really clear about what they believe is important to them culturally. And that's why, you know, as much as we all now work flexibly at Schroders, we've also been really clear with our people that we do expect teams to come together in the office, and that is an integral part of what it means to work at Schroders, regardless of which area of the business that you are in. So yes, it will vary team to team depending on the nature of your role and the activities you do, but still fundamentally we are an organisation that really believes teams do need to come together, and that is just, you know, a given of what it means to be at our firm.
Yeah. And Ravi's asked a question as well, which I'll put to you, Emma, first. A lot of team working and motivation depends on the social interaction that the team has. What suggestions would you give to team managers for team bonding while working remotely?
I was reading an article this week about the benefits of laughter in terms of neurological science, and I do think teams do have to schedule it. You know, Janine and John made the point earlier, we no longer, you don't have those informal happenstance moments around the water cooler or coffee machine. So actually sort of making it fun, you know, we've got some, you know, some of our ERGs, our employee resource groups, are running sort of cooking competitions and lessons. We've had quizzes that are run. We've done certainly around our charity campaigns, encouraging different parts of the business to really sort of get in competition with each other, to who can walk, you know, who can cover the most kilometers in a week or a month, and coming together in that way. But, you know, not losing the fun and social interaction of it is really key, but you do have to be really mindful to schedule it and make time to have those infrequent catch-ups.
I've made a few notes there. It's very useful. Thank you, Emma. Now we've got a couple of questions here about diversity, which I'd like us all to look at. So I'm going to ask you first, Janine. How do you see the impact of the pandemic on diverse groups and minorities, and how do you protect inclusivity in a flexibility agenda?
Yeah, it's a great question. Very much front of mind, I think, for all of us. Sorry about that. So it's a little bit harder for me to pull from data when I think about, for example, ethnic minorities, because we don't track that data on LinkedIn. I think for good reasons, personally. But when you look at gender diversity, it's pretty clear to see that women have been more impacted, especially during the height of the pandemic. Fewer women were hired into new roles than men. And, you know, that could either be because fewer women applied because they are more focused on some of the home responsibilities right now, or because some of the industries that have been impacted the worst typically would have attracted a lot more women. But it is clear that we need to really think about how we continue to engage women so that they stay with us in the workforce, because I think that's really important. I have heard stories around particularly ethnic minorities feeling like they might be more impacted because they are not visible and they're not quite sure if they are going to be front of mind. And I think it's really important to have processes in place that allow you to make really fair and equitable decisions about things. And you might need to think about that a little bit harder right now. So not just for promotions and for hiring decisions, but even when you think about stretch projects, how do you make sure you don't just go for the first person that comes to your mind, but you think about your entire workforce? Maybe you even allow people to apply for certain things, or you deliberately go to people who don't typically raise their hand for things. It's really important. And again, it comes back to some of the, you know, training and development that is critically important for us all to ensure that managers, frontline managers, senior managers, that they understand how to lead in an inclusive way. I actually think that's probably one of the most important leadership skills of the future, to be an inclusive leader and make sure that you can not only hire diverse talent, but you build really diverse teams that work really, really well together.
Thank you. And Emma, I know you have some things to say about this. Can I lob you a question as well from Simone? Do you have any insights or recommendations on how to ensure the Agile workforce, Agile work environment is inclusive? There are lots of opportunities, but there are considerations to be mindful, for example, for someone on the autistic spectrum.
So I think fundamentally we believe that, you know, flexibility can really be at the heart of an inclusive organisation. Fundamentally, it should allow you to access, you know, perhaps very different talent pools than you've accessed in the past. But, you know, interestingly, we do look at our pulse data and employee data, our listening, through an ethnicity lens, but also through other lenses of diversity. And what you see is actually very different responses when you look through those lenses. So for example, if I look at some of the responses from our BAME population, we actually know that some of them are very concerned about, you know, the move to agility and how that will impact, for example, promotion or appraisals. You know, this idea that you need to be line of sight to be able to have that relationship with your manager, you know, and how that's going to impact your career development, your learning opportunities, but also compensation. And what we've done for a couple of years at Schroders, and we're helping our workforce understand that we have these checks and balances within the business, is actually looking at our comp outcomes or our promotion data through that ethnicity lens or disability lens, and ensuring that it looks fair. It's a second line of defence check where you're actually, you know, does this look fair? Does it feel fair? And actually being able to provide some reassurance to those groups that you are doing everything you can in terms of your policies and procedures to make sure that, you know, you are approaching everything from a fair perspective, even though people are remote. And I think one of the biggest challenges for all organisations, and we're really grappling with this at the moment, you know, we recognise with our inclusion strategy that we needed to do more to be more transparent around promotion, compensation, development opportunities, stretch opportunities, as Janine said. But really, when you move to this more flexible and agile way of working, you really have to accelerate that. You really have to be on it to make sure that you're providing that transparency to your diverse groups so that they have that reassurance that, you know, being fair and having that level playing field is really important to you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Emma. I've got some legal questions now for you, John, and they seem to be falling into two categories. So I'll ask the first one first, which is, it's really about the unintended consequences of having a more flexible workforce. And we've got quite a lot of questions about it, but I think it'd be useful if you can talk about the sort of things that we're advising on at the moment, and then I'll ask the additional questions.
Sure, I think you know, unintended consequences are they're exactly that. They're unintended and therefore kind of reactive rather than planned. I think something we're seeing a lot at the moment is that the world of cybercrime and cyber fraud is coming to the forefront, which cyber criminals are taking advantage in. It doesn't affect every industry, but a lot of industries and businesses are having to react to that. I understand that Trowers have recently joined the Cyber Resilience Group, which is a Home Office funded strategy to provide support to businesses, supply chain, third sector organizations. And so, you know, for that reason alone, cyber's top of the list. I think other unintended consequences, tax is probably another one. If you've got a workforce where people are returning home to work, perhaps returning home abroad, there are things around permanent residency tests and things like that, where you can, a business can inadvertently create itself and potentially the individual tax liability because of operating from another jurisdiction. And then other things around if you're changing location permanently because your lease has come to an end and you're deciding that everyone's going to work from home, whether it's for 6 months, 12 months, or you look at commercial property later down the line. There'll be issues around the way people claim expenses, commuting costs, and things like that. But I think, you know, echoing what Janine and Emma have said, businesses are on a different journey in agile working and have been for many years, and we've all been involuntarily accelerated into it. But actually, as we come out of COVID, the extent to which businesses will continue to develop agile working kind of wholesale, like Twitter, or less so, or somewhere in the middle, will based on that business's culture, the sector they're in, and the business needs, and the need to retain business efficacy. And I think in doing that, I think it's really important you don't end up with a two-tier workforce, you know, those who predominantly work from home and those who don't. I think it's really, really important that policies and work practices are applied across all staff. And I think the value in maintaining cohesive teams that work together is really, really important. You know, I think you do need some FaceTime, and not the FaceTime on the phone, the actual stuff.
Great. And we're getting, we've had a couple of questions about people moving to different locations, and that brings me on to the second sort of group of questions we've had, is about contractual changes. And I'll give you an example. So Jonathan says, how does the panel view contractual changes around HR issues such as base offices, expenses, home heating? Perhaps not so relevant for senior staff, but for junior team members, this can be very relevant. John, do you want to talk about the legal issues as well on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think with flexible working generally, if you've got a policy's there for that exact reason. It is a policy, it's not a contractual term. So, you know, Schroders have done a great job of that. It's policy. You look at your business needs, your client needs, and it's driven through policy. If you are say like Twitter or other businesses where their lease is coming up and they're thinking for commercial reasons we're going to shut the office altogether, and then you've got a permanent change of location, then potentially there are contractual issues that need addressing, which will probably have a knock-on effect on requirements to attend meetings, trainings, appraisals, requirements to travel, you know, working hours, core hours. You know, all of that stuff goes in the melting pot. And, you know, if you are looking at wholesale contractual changes, then, you know, they're either done by consent, but if you're looking at, you know, 20 or 100 people respectively, then your collective consultation obligations kick in. So I think I'd be looking at what's policy, what's contractual, what are we changing, and then you're either looking at policy changes and agreeing them, or you're obtaining consent on contractual changes, or you're going down the wholesale collective consultation route.
And another issue on working from home, John, a number of people have raised. So John has asked this question: do you think organisations should undertake any formal revision or update to their current data protection protocols if home working requires data transmission outside of usual office managed secure systems?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the ICO have issued any guidance that there's going to be too much leniency. The fines are high for data breaches, particularly if you're looking at special category data. So, you know, medical records and things like that. So if employees are working from home, they might be in an environment where they're dealing with patient data, vulnerable adult, vulnerable children data, but could be in a home where they're working on a shared computer, could be in shared accommodation where other people can hear what they're saying. So yeah, I do think you need to be looking at that, the privacy notices, data protection policies, whether or not you've got sufficient encryption, password protection at home, and retention of documents, shredding of documents, storage of documents. What view are the ICA going to take on loss and damage? You know, ICA breaches can be expensive, and I'm probably talking to the insurance side of it as well, and what the brokers are saying about it in terms of data breach insurance. But yeah, I would be looking at data.
Thank you. We've got loads of questions, so I'm going to ask a selection of them. If you have asked a question and we don't answer it, we will try and email you afterwards if we can answer it. However, there are a few questions from Anonymous, so if you want to us to respond to those, please can you submit them again with your name, and then we've got your email address. Thank you. Going back to you, Emma, first, I think. How do we, this is from Alan, how do we distinguish between fun and business as usual? Janine mentioned we're working longer hours, and do people feel pressured into working all those hours?
Look, I think you've got to educate your people about the importance of them putting their own boundaries in place. You know, for so many of us, the commute used to provide that boundary between work and home, and now obviously we no longer have that. And you need the leadership and tone from the top to almost have the role models of that behaviour. So you really need to make sure that people within your firm can see your senior leaders taking breaks and talking about what they're doing outside of work, so that you really can help people give permission to do it. You know, and it's culturally very different in different areas. So for example, across our Asia business, we had to introduce the concept of wellness hours for people to be able to take the time. In the UK, the culture within our business is such that actually we can, you know, managers will naturally encourage people to finish early or take a break or to be more flexible. And I think one of the things that's helped as we've talked about our flexible working charter is it isn't just about where you work, but when. So actually, you know, if your activities are much more early morning because you work a lot with our Asia business, then you'll be working a different time, and you know, you don't need to be logged on all the time. You know, the head of HR in my team, for example, who covers the US business, is stuck in London at the moment. You know, again, her working hours are different to mirror our US business, and she takes time for her and her family more in the morning. So it's about giving people that permission, but they also critically, they need to see the senior leaders in the firm also doing that and setting those boundaries and having that balance.
Janine, can I ask you a question about behaviours as well, which is, how can you change old school senior managers' views on agile working, specifically towards trust at getting work done?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I've been part of a conversation between a group of very senior business leaders in a particular industry, which I will not name, who were very much of that mindset. We have to have people in the office. That's the only way we're going to get the productivity. And I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. There's definitely some learning and development required for those leaders, because it's easy enough for us sort of to look at you know, employees and think they're not delivering, they're not being productive, you know, they're not showing up in the way that we want them to show up. But how are we as leaders actually connecting with them, inspiring them, engaging them, and maybe setting those smart targets that we were talking about earlier, so that you start to focus on the output. But I really think it starts with taking a good look at ourselves to make sure that we educate ourselves on how we interact with our teams differently to kind of get them to deliver the output that we are looking for, rather than blaming it on the employees who can't sort of do this because they, you know, they're not going to deliver the productivity that we are looking for. So it's a big mindset shift, and I think it's going to be challenging in an organization if you don't have the very senior leadership on board with this. But if you do, it's about educating all of those managers to interact differently.
And Emma, have you had experience of this, helping change managers' views in the office of working from home?
Yeah, I mean, I think the events of spending a couple of months in full lockdown should have changed the views of even the more sceptical person about being able to trust our employees to work flexibly and do the right thing for our clients. Undoubtedly, though, particularly as, you know, there's always a tendency to slip back into what we know and what we're familiar with. And to Janine's point, that's where the senior leadership support is absolutely critical if you're going to make this change for the long term. So you have to make it very clear it's coming from the top. It's one of the reasons why we put our charter in globally. It's the same set of principles for all of our people, wherever they are in the world. And you're really making sure that you mandate it, but you also have to engage with them and train and educate them and help them understand that, you know, for some of our managers, it's a hugely different way of working than perhaps they've worked for many years. And you have to also, you know, take that challenge on and give them the skills to be able to work in a very different way.
Thank you very much, Emma. I'm learning so much. I'm making lots of notes here. I've got one question now for all of the panel, which is from Andy and also from an anonymous delegate. If a vaccine was available tomorrow, would we go back to the old normal? Is the genie out of the bottle? I can see Emma's views already. John, I'm going to ask you first. I know you're someone who wants to go back to work a bit more.
There's a question, are we going to go back to normal?
If a vaccine was available.
No, I don't think we will. I don't think we will. And I think that there's a lot of positives to agile working. I think it can help inclusivity. I think it helps, you know, there's the disability. There's a million and one reasons why agile working is going to be better, but I think that businesses need to establish their own sector and the way they need to service their clients. And then you look at it from there and have the best possible, most developed agile working policy you can, but that still it gives you that business efficacy, probably better business, more profitability, better productivity. So I don't think there should be some kind of ill thought out leap of faith into agile working utopia, but at the same time, like most things in life, I suspect it will come down to a balance is where I think it will land up. And I think that'll be the same whether or not we get a vaccine tomorrow or in a year's time.
Thanks, John. Emma.
Look, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think the events of the last couple of months have probably accelerated 20 years worth of change in terms of society's acceptance of agile working. And I think it's tremendous for productivity, engagement levels, but also staff well-being. We all know some of the statistics around the economic cost of mental health, and if that isn't right, and actually agility allows our people to have that right balance and just be happier at work, and therefore they will be more productive. So I don't think we will ever return to the old normal. You know, but that said, you know, we fundamentally believe there is absolutely a place for the office, and this is about balance. It's about having, you know, genuinely the best of both worlds, so that we have, you know, the sort of happiest, most engaged and productive workforce that we can possibly have.
Thank you. And Janine.
I couldn't agree more. I think what Emma mentioned around happiness and well-being is just so important. And so rather than maybe repeating, if I just look at my own personal perspective, I used to commute 3 hours every day. And for all those years, I told myself that was totally fine. I kind of enjoyed it. I could listen to a podcast. I could read a book. Now that I have those 3 hours back, there is absolutely no way that I would ever go back to, you know, the old, the normal, whatever it was, because it makes a huge difference. And I think there's so many people who feel that same way. So companies who will push for going back to the old will really struggle to keep their employees engaged. And I think that will create, you know, a natural push to just not go there.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm really sorry that we haven't been able to answer all your questions, but we have, I think, answered over 50 questions in the course of this session, more or less. So I hope you think we've done a good enough job. There are some that we will come back to you on where we can, where people haven't submitted questions anonymously. But I'd like to thank you, the delegates, very much for being so interactive and giving us such good conversation topics. And I'd like to thank the panel very much for all of your wise words and great hints. Step challenge. I think I'm going to get the team doing a step challenge. And so thank you very much indeed, Emma, Janine and John. It's been really interesting for me, as well as the many people who are now emailing in and saying thank you very much. So goodbye, everybody.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.